What is up? Today I'm going to tell you my thoughts on Ilford Delta 3200. It sucks. Okay, I'm just kidding. I do have much more nuanced thoughts to share with you on this topic, and this film does have pros and cons. Overall, I do think it just kind of sucks. So there's the TLDR if you don't want to watch this whole video, and here's where I see my audience retention nosedive, but stick around if you're interested to hear why it sucks. So Delta 3200 is billed as the world's fastest black and white film stock, at least according to Ilford. Their website boasts that this stock's high ISO is ideal for low light conditions and fast action. And in my experience, one of those things is true. So I shot one roll of this film, it is 36 exposures, and I shot it in a variety of environments in order to compare how it performs in different shooting conditions in different contexts. And I have determined, based on these experiments, that it really isn't as good for low light conditions as I thought it would be based on the ISO. There are several characteristics that make this film interesting to talk about, but I probably wouldn't buy it again anytime soon. So, in this video, I'm going to tell you about the film, tell you what it is, what it does, about its specs, my experiments, and my results. And maybe I'll inspire you to go out and pick up a roll to try it out and maybe prove me wrong. First off, let's talk specs. What makes this film unique? So, high ISO films are referred to as fast films. It means that they have a greater sensitivity to light and can therefore soak up light faster than other film stocks. So that's what makes Ilford Delta 3200 great for fast action. You can take a picture using a very fast shutter speed and still get a decently exposed image out of it. But high ISO does come with a consequence, and that consequence is due to the physical aspect of the film that makes it more photosensitive. Very cool and very quick film chemistry lesson here. Film is coated with silver halide crystals, and when these crystals are exposed to light, they undergo a chemical reaction and change into metallic silver. As do I. This reaction to light is how images are preserved on film, and the larger the silver halide particles, the crystals, are, the faster they react to light. But conversely, larger particles, which are more light sensitive, will also be more visible in the final image. And this is what gives you film grain. Really, really light sensitive films are also extremely grainy. Delta 3200 has a comparatively very large crystal structure, and so it reacts very quickly to light exposure, but also produces an image that has extremely visible film grain. Now, you might be thinking, as I thought, isn't surface area a catalyst? So wouldn't smaller particles be more reactive to light because they have more combined surface area than a collection of larger particles? I was really stuck on that, so I asked Reddit, and Reddit actually told me that, and I know this is a tangent, but each silver halide crystal, in order to undergo the chemical reaction, must be exposed to exactly 4 photons. And so the larger the crystal particle, the higher the likelihood is that in a given amount of time that the shutter is open, that particle will be exposed to 4 photons. Cool, right? Anyway, I thought that was neat. So there's a trade-off here, right, between brightness and film grain in an image. And I think there's honestly a sweet spot for both. And I think that sweet spot is somewhere in the 800 ISO range, where an image can be captured that is bright enough to show a sufficient amount of detail, but not so grainy as to obscure that detail in return. Ilford Delta 3200, unfortunately, lies beyond that sweet spot in my opinion. But potentially not for the reasons you'd think. There's quite a bit of speculation online that this isn't actually a true 3200 ISO stock, nor, in fact, are competitor stocks like Kodak T-Max 3200. No, some say that this is in fact a 1000 ISO stock with a very wide exposure latitude, which honestly makes sense given my own experience shooting with this stock. What is an exposure latitude, you may ask? Well, it's basically the extent to which a film can be pushed or pulled, overexposed or underexposed, and still achieve an acceptable result. This is apparently a 1000 ISO film that's being pushed to 3200 without losing too much fidelity, and it can therefore be marketed as a 3200 ISO stock. So when I shot my roll, I metered it at 3200, and I was surprised by how little light it actually picks up in what I would consider to be fairly well lit nighttime conditions. Here, for example, is a shot of a subway that I took, and from this picture, it looks like there's just like a few streetlights going on, but this is actually right underneath a very well-lit stadium. This is Stadium Chinatown Station, for those of you who know Vancouver, and the entire area is completely illuminated 24/7. Like, you could have captured this scene on Cinestill with perfect detail, and Cinestill is an 800 ISO film. Here is a shot of Vancouver City Hall taken at night, and while you can clearly see that it is iced with lines of lights, those lights apparently don't cast enough light down the building to illuminate the walls. I was expecting more of that light to show up in this image, especially since I shot this image overexposed according to the light meter based on the 3200 ISO setting, and it still came out what I would consider to be very underexposed. So I didn't really do a lot of research about this film stock before going in. I kind of just wanted to test it out and get my own opinion on it before I learned anyone else's. So I went into it expecting it to be 3 times as bright or sensitive to light as Cinestill 800T, and that didn't really seem to be the case. Direct points of light in the image do show up very well. They often are like pure white, but anything that is illuminated by that direct point of light is pretty much completely obscured in shadow. So the idea that this film is actually a 1000 ISO film with a somewhat inflated box speed, well, that does ring true to me. That said, the wide exposure latitude means that it can be pulled, which I think would be a pretty good idea. If I were to shoot this film for the sake of getting good images instead of for testing out its capacity at 3200 ISO, I would probably meter it for 800 ISO and pull it 2 stops. Pulling film is seldom done, but I honestly think in this case it makes a lot more sense than shooting at box speed. But anyway, I do want to talk a little bit more in depth about my experience shooting with this film and some of the images that I was able to capture. So, I shot this film in December, which is the darkest month of the year. I thought it would be a perfect time to shoot a film that apparently functions best in the dark, and most of what I shot was outside at night, though I did do a few photos in studio as well. I photographed direct light, ambient light, some reflected light, and some diffuse light. This diffuse light one was taken on a foggy day, and on Cinestill I think this shot would have had a cool, eerie effect, but on this film it just kind of looks like I missed focus, and maybe the lens was foggy. I took a few shots during snowfall and a few more on a clear night, so here's a comparison. The snowfall shot is kind of cool, but the detail in the tree branches is completely lost due to the grain, I think, and since that detail was all that was making this admittedly underwhelming photo interesting to look at, it's a pretty catastrophic loss to the image. Out of all of the lighting conditions that I shot this film in, I actually think the photos that were taken with direct light on a very clear subject turned out the best. This photo, which I actually think is the best of the roll, fits that criteria pretty well. It's got a very clear subject, the mannequin, which is illuminated by a shop window that was directly overhead, and then there's still a little bit of visual interest going on around the frame, including this reflection of a girl in the bus stop ad, and funnily enough, I've shot with this model before, so I was able to tag her in this photo. Any photo that had too much detail and not enough light did not work out at all. Like, the grain structure of the film pretty much completely wiped out anything that wasn't completely in focus or very well lit, which even then, the results weren't great, to be honest with you. The other shots I took into shop windows just didn't turn out at all, and that was like a good chunk of the roll were shop window shots that I thought would be really cool and ambient and eerie, but no, there's no ambient light that gets captured with this film, and I was really relying on it in a lot of these shots. I don't know. This one of my friend Joanna downtown worked out pretty well. It's an underwhelming and boring photo, but she looks nice in it, and I think the lighting worked. But even so, even in the perfect conditions, it still kind of looks like I missed focus just because the grain obscures the detail to such an extent. Same problem in this selfie, which is one of the clearer photos on the roll. This was like taken in a mirror, very, very like perfect focus. And yeah, the grain, I have like 4 pixels total in my eyeball, so not a fan of that. I do like this picture though. It's probably gonna be my new profile pic on grainery. It does bother me because portraits are usually striking when the eyes are in focus and you've got this really crisp, intense detail staring back at you. And that is simply not possible on this film stock. So I guess just don't take portraits with it. So yeah, I guess you can shoot this film stock in darker than normal conditions and still produce an image, but it isn't clear enough and there's not enough detail actually being captured in that image to make it worth shooting. I do like what this film taught me about film chemistry. That was probably honestly my favorite part of the roll, was learning about why larger silver halide crystals react faster to light, but other than that, I found most of the photos that I took with this disappointing. That's it. That's actually my thoughts. That's actually the end of the video. Maybe you're inspired to go out and prove me wrong, pick up a roll of this yourself, and show me that you were able to capture absolutely spectacular, beautiful, glowing dark images, which I would be extremely impressed if you were. But yeah, that's the whole video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next week. Bye.